Hello, hello, beautiful soul. Happy Wednesday to you. I pray that you're doing well, and thank you for joining me. If this is your first time tuning in, I am Dr. Andrea Pennington, coming to you from the sunny south of France. And today we are exploring finding the courage to start your whole life over. I shared recently that the way I see 2020 is it really is the Great Equalizer. There's not a single person on the planet who hasn't been affected in some way by the craziness of the pandemic, the isolation, the lockdown, all of it. And what that means is that means that even the people who are quote unquote stable, who kept their jobs or didn't get sick, they know someone who did, or they've lost someone who got sick. If you were sick and you went through the hellacious process of getting over COVID, then you are probably looking at life very differently. So I call 2020 this great equalizer because it has kind of knocked everyone on their butt, and it's making us all kind of look at what we value in life, what our life actually means to us. And as me and my partner at Diamond Life Design, Derry Llewellyn Davies, we are always having this conversation about, are you living with regrets? And if you were to die today, would you be dying with any regrets? And that seems like a heavy question, but I'm here to share some light and some hope in this because I have been studying resilience and what makes people give up on life and what makes a life worth living. So we all are going to face things that knock us out. We're all going to face illness, death, aging, loss, rejection, abandonment. Like it's all going to happen at some point to you in your life. And for me, what I've been asking this question when I had my big, kind of medical practice was there were two kinds of people that I was working with. In my Hollywood media career, I was hanging out with superstars and legends and people who were thriving, and not always because they had some silver spoon in their mouths, but they worked to get to where they were at the height of their career as singers, performers, and what have you. And then on the other hand, in my wellness center, over time, I started to work with people who were dealing with addiction and eating disorders and a lot of stress and drama and trauma. And what I wanted to do was translate what all the superstars were doing into my patients that were suffering. And I kept going back to this question of what is it that makes some people crumble after devastating loss or an illness or even a breakup? What is it that makes them give up on life? And what is it that in those other people who had the exact same things happen to them, but they didn't give up on life? They used it as fuel to keep going. And it comes down to a few things tied to mindset, as you can imagine. But I want to give you a little more of the research behind it. So it's not just my opinion, but what I started to recognize was there are certain psychological components of our sense of self. And essentially, there are actually six. There are six factors of psychological well-being, according to Carol Riff, who was studying this back in the 80s, long before the positive psychology movement came in. She recognized that to have strong psychological well-being, you needed to have an attitude around personal growth, meaning that you were still open to the possibility of learning and growing, and you could apply yourself. There's something called environmental mastery. Only researchers could come up with these terms, but it's a sense of being able to use whatever is in your environment to advance you in your life, for example. Some of these other psychological factors, one of the number one, for me, number one is autonomy. And that is, do you feel that you have the ability to call the shots in your life? Or are you feeling like everybody else is running your life? This has been one of those things that, for me personally, my mother is from British Guyana, as you probably have heard, And there are a lot of people who have immigrant parents. My mother immigrated to London and then later moved to America. And there are a lot of immigrant parents who will say to their children things like, "You have no idea all the things that I sacrificed. You know, I used to do this and all these jobs just so that you could, have a good education, whatever, whatever." And there is a sense of not having autonomy. So by autonomy, it is that sense that you are self-determining, you are independent, you are able to resist social pressures or parental pressure to think and regulate your own behavior and evaluate yourself. Well, that is one of the 6 elements of psychological well-being, is a sense of autonomy. So we've talked about personal growth, autonomy, environmental mastery. The other one, which many of you know I've focused on, is self-acceptance. When you have high self-acceptance, it means you have a high and a positive attitude about yourself. It's not that you only look at the positive, you acknowledge the multiple aspects of you, including your shadow, and you feel, in general, positive about yourself. Like what I noticed in the clients who didn't thrive after drama and trauma is some of them were lacking in that element of self-acceptance. If you don't accept yourself, if you don't believe that you deserve love and you don't deserve happiness, it's going to be very hard for those things to manifest in your life. So that's also an important one. And there are 2 other key factors that make up this psychological well-being. The next one is purpose in life. And that is where you have a sense that you have goals, you have a sense of directedness, and meaning, and also feeling like there's meaning to your present life, to your potential future life, and even what you've endured and experienced so far. And then the 6th trait of psychological well-being is having a positive relationship with other people, meaning you can have trusting relationships with others, you care about others, you're capable of empathy and affection and intimacy. And so these are the 6 aspects of psychological well-being. And if you've got those, you can really bounce back. You will have a higher tendency to become resilient. But if you're missing any of those, well, that's what I was starting to see in my patients. I noticed that the people who had low self-acceptance didn't do well. The people who didn't feel that they were in control of their lives, they didn't do well. They didn't even feel like what's the point of living? And so a lot of these conversations here in 2020 have been like rushing to the forefront because there are some people who feel like, I have lost everything. There are people who've lost their jobs, their finances, their health, their relationships. And so when all of those go, it's kind of justifiable that some people would give up hope and they'd say, I don't even know what I'm living for anymore. Is this ringing true for you? Do you know anyone who's in that situation? Because we've all been hit by something. And if we listen to the news, God forbid, please do not listen to the news 24/7. But if you look at what people are talking about with how long COVID is going to last, how many years of this financial recession we're going to be experiencing as a result of what's happened in 2020, things could look potentially bleak. And you'd be justified in that. However, as I've said, the other people that I was working with, the people who were able to use their tragedy, their adversity, to not only bounce back, that's what resilience is, the ability to bounce back, but to bounce forward. And so I want to share a little bit of insight on post-traumatic growth, because post-traumatic growth is available to us, and it's a matter of choice. So hear me out. I know that may sound like, I don't know, pie in the sky, but I want you to imagine we're in a world where there is a financial crisis. And imagine you're, in your 40s, married, couple of kids, previously, you were rocking it in your job. And imagine in one fell swoop, literally in a matter of months, you lose everything. As a result of losing your job, you lose the money, you lose the status. And as a result of that, maybe you lose your health because you stop eating good stuff and start drinking more alcohol. Well, you don't even have to imagine it. I've done an interview with Rob Goddard, who is one of the co authors in the top 10 traits of highly resilient people. He wrote a book called, I think I have it right here. I'm giving away the punchline, but he wrote this book called Suicide to Success. And you will meet Rob in my upcoming documentary film about resilience, because this is a man who endured exactly what I described to you. So, again, when we talk about starting from zero, Rob was at less than zero, lost his marriage, was estranged from his children, lost his job, his finances, was in debt. And when he went to the doctor, he just admitted everything. Like, he got this little questionnaire. He lives in the UK, got this questionnaire, and it said, have you considered suicide or harming yourself? Check. He said yes. And when the doctor saw that on his questionnaire, the doctor said, okay, we're going to connect you with this service that deals with people who are suicidal, and I'm going to give you a prescription for antidepressants. Pretty standard, right? Well, he took the prescription, and in Rob's mind, you'll hear him tell this story, he thought, okay, I'm sure in a couple of weeks, I'll be feeling back to my old chipper self and life will be better again. Unfortunately, that depression lasted for 2 years. And crazily enough, he never got the call from the suicide prevention services in the UK. He tried his best to kind of like pull things together, but he got to a point where he was truly suicidal. And again, I'm not going to share all of it. It's in this book. And in this book, Suicide to Success. But one of the things that Rob did when he gave up on life, he started making a plan, because in his mind, he felt like the future was completely bleak. Not only was he starting at zero, but we were in a recession. And he didn't feel like, I mean, he couldn't get a job because he had been so overqualified in all of his positions. And I'm bringing this up because there's so many people who've told me the same situation is going on today, that they feel like they're behind the 8 ball, that they're starting over from ground zero. And the reality is, it's possible. Not only did Rob survive his suicide attempt, again, I'm going to let you read his words or watch our interview, but one of the things that saved him was reaching out to someone that he'd met before he went on this journey. And it's part of the reason that I come on here live. It's having this connection, even if it's across cyberspace. And there is this possibility that you can reach out for help. And so going back to this list of these 6 factors of psychological well-being, there's also another 6 factors that correlate to post-traumatic growth. I'm going to zero in on the ones that you can focus on today. One is, despite how bleak it may look, there comes a moment when you've got to sort of tap into your imagination. And I know that could sound like completely like weird, especially coming from a physician. But one of the things that we have to do is to get out of our myopic, limited thinking. Like right now, if you're watching the news, if you're watching the stock market, if you're watching your bank account, you've got limited tunnel vision, and you're probably not seeing the whole picture. We have to kind of take a step back and let our focus go wider. And I invite you to just imagine that despite losing everything, imagine that you could bounce back or even bounce forward. Because I know there's like 2 groups of people out there. There's the person who has been kind of comfortable. You've been in a job that you didn't really like, or a relationship, or a country, or whatever. You've been in a situation that you know wasn't really fulfilling, but you settled. And maybe you got a little comfortable, a little complacent. And what 2020 is doing is it's shaking you up to recognize if you could potentially die, because of, this little virus. You will eventually die anyway, but it's kind of bringing us face to face with our mortality. And if you were to go out, is that how you'd want to be going out, with those regrets? And then, of course, there's the other type of person who really did lose everything, and you're maybe in a little bit more of a desperate situation. And you're also recognizing something's got to change. There is no going back to normal. Like, we'll never get there. Wonderful, Danny. I'm so very glad to know that you are ready to bounce back and that you're optimistic. And that's exactly what we need. We need that optimism. And so where does optimism come from? Because it's part of this psychological capital. It's part of psychological well-being. Where does optimism come from? Well, some of it is going to have to come from your imagination. Some of it may come from reading books like these, where you can read about other people who've done it. But the thing that you can do right now is just first to imagine, if you were able to bounce forward, what would you be doing? What would be different? What would be around you that would be different? From the job, the people, the places, what would you be doing if you're in a job that you don't love, that is not fulfilling you? If you could imagine a brighter future, what would you be doing? Because that's exactly what Alex did for Rob. Alex sat Rob down and said, listen, okay, I get it. You've lost everything. You're beyond rock bottom. What do you want with your life? And at first, Rob, as he tells it, typical guy, he says, I don't know, thinking that he could kind of dodge the question. But Alex pushed him further and said, if you did know what you want, what would that look like? And just, even though it seems like how you want to go into the like how could I actually make that happen? Don't. Tuning into optimism first starts with the vision. It also starts with this willingness to take off the blinders, to look out a little bit beyond your immediate circumstance. You can call it a dream if you want, but what would your heart tell you would actually do if you could? And as Rob started brainstorming, he saw himself, building a business, but this time really focusing on what he loved. And at that time, this was 10 years ago, he was like, yeah, I'm really good at mergers and acquisitions. I'd be doing that, earning a 6-figure salary. And, why not? Having the partner of my dreams with a home on the Mediterranean. And I think there was another piece to his dream about a double-decker bus. But again, I'll let you read the story. Now, he didn't get into the how. You first have to ignite this willingness to tune into the vision. What would it look like, feel like, smell like, taste like? Who would you be with? And how would you be using your strengths, your talents, and your abilities to do that? Because that's the first step. Now, we've talked about mindset a bit. You do have to be willing to get out of your comfort zone. And I've been sharing a lot about this because with my mom, getting that phone call that she was in the ICU and just reflecting on all the stuff that my mother has achieved and done, I just realized, what am I doing? Now, I don't need you guys sending me messages. I'm not, morbid over here, but I definitely have been looking at my own life and asking, am I really living up to my potential? And this idea of being in a comfort zone, that is absolutely where I've been. So, hello, hola, beautiful Haifa. You say, the thing is that you go into a circle, and sometimes that does not allow you to see beyond that. And most of the time, it's fear. That is so true. Haifa, it's like we do get into this sort of comfort zone, and it is a circle or a cycle. And that's what I noticed in my own life. But I was talking to some other people, and early in the pandemic, we were talking about, quarantine. Okay, well, I don't know, let's use this time to read or, do all of these other things we've always dreamt of doing, starting a business, learning a new language, writing that book. And many of us looked at quarantine. Of course, at that time, we thought it was only going to last a short period of time. So we were willing to like hunker down. And then the more of the panic started to set in, the longer we were in isolation. But now we're coming back around full circle. And I've been having these conversations with people around the idea of reinvention. Like, what if we used this period of time, even if you are starting from zero, like Rob was, or like I was when I moved to the south of France? What if you use this time to get super clear on what you value in life, who you really are, and what you stand for? Now, of course, that's going to take courage, but you don't have to do it alone. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that I've learned after my first TED Talk kind of made the rounds. People were watching this TED Talk where I talked about how I went down this path to become a physician, partly because of that parental influence, but I found myself molded and folded into a box and eventually creating a media brand that wasn't truly me. And the idea of getting out of the box sounds very scary. Leaving your comfort zone, even if it's a painful zone, sounds scary, especially if you have to do it alone. If you're going to be leaving people behind, if you're going to be leaving relationships that don't fit you, that can be scary. But what if you could do that in community with like-minded people, as you've seen in my community, who can support you? That's part of what we're here to do. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. I feel like the most important thing for us is to allow ourselves to say, what if? Because when you are so fixed and attached to only one way out, and you see that that one way is not here, then that uncertainty just creates even more fear. And that can lead to hopelessness. And that's why the number of people committing suicide, people getting burnt out and just giving up on life, is because they don't see a brighter future. So what about you all? Anyone willing to chime in, share in the chat? Are you willing, open-minded, and able to consider that this might be a blessing? I know that's hard, but I'm often reminded of the beautiful work of Viktor Frankl. And I love reading his quotes, because it's like, let's see, what the one I'm thinking of is something like, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Like, we could cry and moan about a government bailout and finding a new job. I mean, we have that tendency to look for some outside savior. We want someone to rescue us. But what if the hero you're waiting for is you? So that was one of the things that so impressed me when I read Viktor Frankl's book, The Man's Search for Meaning. Like, here was a guy that was in a concentration camp, had been removed from his family, didn't know if he was going to live or ever see anyone again. But it was this concept that everything could be taken away, but the last human freedom, in Viktor Frankl's words, is our ability to choose our attitude, no matter what's going on in our circumstances. And so I'm just inviting you to have that same sense of what if. And one of the other things that I love about Viktor Frankl's story, which relates back to this vision thing, when Viktor was talking about his time in the concentration camps, and he saw that the people who had like given up on life, who said, look, people are dying every day, we're getting skinnier and weaker every day, those people who felt like they had lost hope and had nothing else to live for, unfortunately, they would end up being the ones to die. And as Viktor was looking at the people who persisted, it was that they found some sense of meaning. How do you find meaning in a freaking concentration camp? Well, one of the things that Viktor did is he said that they couldn't take away his mind. And as he was making these, I mean, he was already a psychotherapist, So he had a mind for it, but as he was analyzing the mindset of his fellow prisoners, it was like he recognized an opportunity. And he said, when I get out of here, I can imagine myself giving lectures at a university. And it was these forward visions and that sense of meaning that allowed him to glean the energy from the suffering and turn it into a purpose. Does that make sense? So that's part of what I feel like we are all being challenged to do right now. I feel like I'm with you, Alex. Alex says, this is an opportunity to dig deep and figure out how we can find ourselves and our purpose and how we can add value to the world. Absolutely, Alex. And that is exactly what Viktor Frankl said he was going to do. He was going to teach this stuff. And he ended up doing exactly that. He ended up, creating what is called logotherapy, which is all about finding meaning and purpose in life and allowing that to propel you to move forward. So, Lee, I see what you've written here. The past couple of weeks have been crazy, but that's when you were ready to start getting out of your fear and recover enough from toxic work and depression to start working on your business, which is what you've wanted for so long. And yeah, it's scary, but it's to take another step forward. But Lee, you are not alone, my friend. You are in the right place. So kudos to you to use this time to recover from that toxic work environment. The number of people entering into burnout in 2020, like burnout was already, named a workplace phenomenon by the WHO. We only recently got this diagnostic classification for burnout, but it's all tied to work and unemployment. But now that people who maybe weren't working, they were housewives or house husbands taking care of kids and family, they're now stretched so thin that the rate of burnout is incredible. So we're all in this crazy dance of learning to balance and recover from our toxic work environments. And I would say, don't go back. People talk about going back to normal. That wasn't normal. That was just the crap we tolerated. And yes, so Danny says, agreed. This time is a blessing and a time to reinvent ourselves, not to fall over and give up. And E. Dunlap asks, how can you be your own hero with scant resources? Well, I would say, tune into this book. I also did an interview with Rob because Rob literally was in debt, had no money, had no job, actually had no home, ended up staying on a friend's couch, like piecing together. One of the things that he did is he got a job teaching English. And while he had created a vision for what he wanted to do business-wise, to make it work, he had to teach English. Now, I talked about on last week's live with Delia Sanchez. She also was having this feeling like she wanted to do something, didn't have the resources, ended up going to Singapore, met the man in her life, and she wanted to stay. But she couldn't work in Singapore as a pharmacist, which is what she trained to do. So she started teaching Portuguese and Spanish. So sometimes you have to look at what do you have right now in terms of resources, what talents or gifts or strengths can you bring to the world in this moment while you are creating a vision for what you want. Now, what Rob ended up doing, he had zero resources. He couldn't even borrow money because he was so far in debt. But he had an idea. And what he did was he started pitching that idea and got his first couple of investors. And I mean, he said he was like, he had a laptop and a broadband connection, and that was it. He had a car, that was it. But he started to share the vision that he had for creating a company. And today, that company is worth well over £1 million. And he ended up creating a sister company in Dubai, so in the UK and Dubai. So you may have to make do in the short term, do what you can do while you are focusing on that dream. But it can't be a matter of turning over and giving up. So, yeah. I love that, Reggie. You say, blow out a little more fear with each deep exhale and breathe in a little more faith. Well, I'm curious to hear what else is working for you. How are you all keeping up your morale? Would you be willing to do this investigation of, creating a future vision? I created an excerpt. I took an excerpt out of my book, The Real Self-Love Handbook, and added a guided meditation process from the book that helps you create a future vision. There's also stuff about activating your inner hero. And you can do this for free. It's on my website, but I'm going to try to find the link as fast as I can. Um, it's the 3 keys to becoming the hero of your own life, and you can do this process and literally reprogram your mind, because that's ultimately what we need to do. If you have found yourself getting a little soft, if you have found yourself kind of giving into pity parties, if you have found yourself looking at all of the reasons why you can't, all of the fear that you may have around what your parents are going to say, what your friends are going to say, I would say, let that stuff go. For real. In my own situation, I knew that there was going to be people who didn't agree with what I was doing, but meaning moving here to the south of France, but I did it anyway. So if you go to, I'm going to pop this link on the screen, I think. That's what I'm going to try to do for you. It's a bit.ly link. So 3 keys to becoming the hero in your life. Let's see if I can get this on the fly. You'll find that this includes, so you have to put in the HTTP with bit.ly links, http://3 keys to hero. You'll find that there is a life writing exercise and guided meditations to help you first, kind of get clear on if you are stuck in victim mentality, if you've got limiting beliefs that say, I'm too old, or it's too late, or, I'm just screwed. We need to look at those programs in your subconscious mind and address them, and then tuning into an inspiring vision for your future based on your strengths and your talents, and then creating a path toward it. So if you go to, you can also go to andreapennington.com and you'll find the link to the 3 keys to becoming the hero of your life. And I promise you, you will find it useful. And then on the second Tuesday in October, you can join me for a live coaching session where we can, totally look it over. Okay? So that's it, my friends. That's what I wanted to share for you. I wanted to share this concept that we are the heroes that we've been waiting for. And it's a matter of mastering your mindset. And you can start with these little steps by tuning into this vision, looking at your strengths and talents, and imagining yourself actually living from that space. And then reaching out. You're going to need positive relationships. So for those of you who are struggling with self-confidence and self-love, then it might be worth it to tap into the Real Self-Love community. We've got a private Facebook group, and I go live. I share, again, totally for free on the second Tuesday of the month, live coaching, so that you don't have to do this alone. When I moved to France, I didn't know anyone here. It was me and my kid, and I had to start from ground zero and rebuild my life, rebuild my career, my social networks, and eventually the family members who didn't want me to leave, they've come around. But you definitely don't want to do this alone. So thank you all for being here. And thank you, Lee, for bringing in some levity. So you thought of a funny way to describe burnout, says Lee. Making jokes is the one way that I cope with the difficulty. Burnout feels like being told to do a Muppet show with only your feet in a life and death situation. Yeah, that would feel being very stretched to the limits. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate you for tuning in. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Dunlap. I pray that this has been inspiring. Tomorrow, I will be going live with my dear friend and colleague, Delia Sanchez, and we're going to share a little bit more on this holistic approach to reinvention and working through some of how we have dealt with imposter syndrome. Because once you have that vision, what comes up for a lot of people is this feeling of, but who am I to dream big? Who am I to think I'm going to start a company? Who am I to, right? So tomorrow we will be sharing live again on Facebook and YouTube. So please do join us then. I thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here. Please do not give up because there is so much potential in us that we're not even using. And I'm saying this for myself. I have recognized it and I have challenged myself. My accountability buddy, Trevor, in America, we've been like sparring on video chat. Like, I am not going to back down from leveling up. I'm going to take the rest of this year to really level up and to play an even bigger game. And I'm inviting you to do the same. So, my dear friends, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I hope that you will join me then. Please remember that you are a gift to the world. So, share your presence with passion. Much love, everyone. Have a fabulous rest of your day. Bye.